Welcome to another deep dive. Today it looks like a pretty big topic, all those ups and downs of childhood, especially, from that parent's perspective.
It is a big one.
We've got a lot here. The Parent's Guide to Psychological First Aid, some chapters on family dynamics, even a bit about college prep.
It's quite the mix of sources, but you know what ties it all together for me?
What's that?
This focus on really understanding why kids behave the way they do. It's not just a list of problems. This is more like a toolkit, for approaching those really tough moments with empathy and, like we said, that parental perspective.
Okay, I'm ready to open that toolkit. Let's dive in, shall we?
Let's do it.
All right, so first up, health issues. I think every parent at some point has worried about bedwetting.
Absolutely. It's so incredibly common. But what I found interesting is that there are different types of bedwetting, or enuresis, as it's formally known.
Oh, okay. Like what?
Well, the Parent's Guide breaks it down. There's nighttime bedwetting, which most people think of, but there's also daytime accidents, and the causes aren't always obvious.
Oh, interesting. I always figured it was just potty training taking time.
Well, that can be part of it, but there's often a strong family history component. And even bladder sensitivity, which, a lot of parents might not consider. What really struck me, though, was how bedwetting was treated in the past.
I have a feeling it wasn't very gentle.
Not at all. We're talking harsh punishments, and they didn't even work. Thankfully, these modern approaches are a lot more humane and effective.
Okay, so give me the good news. What are they doing differently now?
It's kind of like a multi-pronged approach, combining things like behavior therapy with alarms to help kids wake up. Even scheduled bathroom breaks can help. And in some cases, medication can be useful, but it's not a cure-all.
So it sounds like a much more individual approach than just trying to apply one solution to every kid.
Exactly, which is the theme I'm seeing pop up across these sources.
I like that. Okay, so bedwetting is one thing, but accidents with, well, poop.
You're talking about encopresis?
Yes. That just feels like a whole other level of worry for parents.
Yeah, you're right. It can be really distressing for families. And the Parent's Guide dives into this one, too. And again, there are different types. The most common one is retentive encopresis. And here is where that whole child perspective really comes into play.
Okay, I'm all ears.
It often stems from a combo of constipation and anxiety.
Really?
Think about it. If a child is anxious about going to the bathroom, maybe because of past discomfort, they might hold it in, which worsens constipation. That makes going even more painful, and it just becomes this vicious cycle.
Wow, I wouldn't have made that connection. So it's not just a physical issue, there's a real mental and emotional component there.
Exactly. And that's why treatment focuses not only on physically, disimpacting, but also making dietary changes to make things easier to pass, and crucially, behavior therapy.
To address that anxiety head on.
Exactly.
Man, it's amazing how many layers there are to these seemingly simple problems.
It is. And speaking of complex issues, one that can really impact both physical and mental well-being, we got to talk about sleep.
Oh, don't I know it?
I bet.
If I had $1 for every night, I spent pacing with a fussy baby.
You and every parent out there. But what's interesting is how sleep problems change as kids get older. With infants and toddlers, it's a lot about settling difficulties and those dreaded night wakings. And oftentimes that comes down to something called sleep onset associations.
Okay, sleep onset associations, big words. Break that down for me.
So imagine your little one. They only fall asleep while being rocked, or maybe while they're feeding. They haven't quite learned to self-soothe back to sleep if they wake up during the night. So they need that same thing, that same association to drift back off again.
So their brain is like, this means sleep time.
Exactly. Now, as kids get older, those sleep troubles, they start to morph. Suddenly, it's difficulty falling asleep or staying asleep, or even feeling exhausted during the day.
So new worries for us parents, just as we thought we were in the clear.
Right. And the reason behind those struggles, well, it's kind of a mix of biology. Their natural sleep patterns are shifting at that age. Plus their development, their ability to self-regulate. And then, of course, there's the environment. Everything from screen time to family stress can impact their sleep.
Oh, so it's complicated. No easy answers. But I'm guessing good sleep hygiene is still key.
Absolutely. Consistent bedtime, a relaxing routine, a calming sleep environment. It's crucial at every age. But when that's not enough, the Parent's Guide points to behavioral interventions as being really effective.
Okay, fill me in. What does that look like in practice?
Well, for toddlers, it might be something like extinction, which sounds harsh, but it's really about gently teaching them to fall asleep independently. For older kids, it's more about positive reinforcement, rewarding them for staying in bed and following that sleep routine.
So tailoring the approach to where they're at developmentally.
Exactly. And speaking of things that can impact both physical and mental well-being, let's tackle a sensitive one: obesity.
Ooh. Okay. And honestly, a bit confusing. Is it just about weight, or is there more to it than that?
That is a great question. You see, obesity is actually defined by BMI percentile, which takes into account a child's age and their sex. It's not just about comparing them to, classmates, but looking at their individual growth patterns.
Ah, okay. So it's more nuanced than just are they overweight,
Yeah.
compared to everyone else.
Precisely. And it matters because obesity impacts so much physical health, of course, but also their social relationships and even their mental well being. It's multifaceted.
And I'm guessing the causes are multifaceted too.
You got it. Genetics plays a role, the environment they're growing up in. Think access to healthy food, opportunities for physical activity, and then, of course, their own behaviors around food and movement all contribute.
So it's not as simple as just telling kids to eat less and move more.
No, not at all. The Parent's Guide really stresses the importance of family-based interventions. It's not about just changing one kid's habits, it's about the whole family's approach to diet, activity, and those underlying behaviors.
Right? Makes sense. Kids learn by watching us, so it's about creating that supportive environment, not just, pointing fingers.
Exactly. And just like those other health challenges, these interventions, they can be tailored to the individual child and their family. Now, while we're talking about food, I'm curious, where do you think picky eating fits into all of this? Is it a health concern or just a phase?
Picky eating. Man, I think every parent has gone through that battle. Honestly, I always assumed it was just a phase most kids grow out of.
It is super common, especially in those early childhood years. And like we've been seeing, it's often influenced by, more than just a kid being picky. Their development, their individual behaviors, even family dynamics at mealtimes, they all play a part.
So not necessarily a sign of something more serious. That's reassuring, although I'm sure it can still be stressful for parents.
Absolutely. And it's important to differentiate picky eating from something like anorexia, which is a serious eating disorder with deep psychological roots. Picky eating is about preferences, phases. Anorexia is a whole different ballgame.
Good point, yeah. So for those of us with quote-unquote regular picky eaters, any tips from the sources on, expanding their food horizons?
Two things stood out to me. Controlling access to those preferred foods. So not making it a free-for-all of the stuff they'll always choose, and encouraging variety. It's not about banning treats, but making sure those healthy options are always available and appealing.
Okay, so patience, consistency, and maybe some creative plating skills are a parent's best friend.
You got it. And if it becomes extreme, if it impacts their growth, professional guidance is never a bad idea.
Speaking of serious issues, let's touch on anorexia. That's something I know a lot of parents, especially as kids get older, worry about.
And for good reason. It's a serious eating disorder. It can have, really life-altering consequences. And the Parent's Guide points out that it often affects high-achieving individuals, often those who may seem like they have it all together on the surface. And it's not just about being thin. It's a deeply distorted body image.
Yeah, so it's not vanity. It's this complex psychological struggle.
Absolutely. For people with anorexia, weight loss becomes a compulsion, even when they're already dangerously underweight. Early intervention is vital, and it requires a whole team: doctors, therapists, often nutritionists too.
Yeah, it's a stark reminder that, we're talking about childhood challenges, but some of these issues can have lasting effects if they're not addressed.
Such an important point. And it brings us to the next part of our deep dive: the often messy, always impactful world of family issues.
All right, let's unpack that. Family dynamics can definitely make or break a child's well-being. Thinking something I know a lot of parents struggle with: communicating with a child who's withdrawn.
Oh, that can be tough.
Yeah.
And the Parent's Guide stresses open communication, but also avoiding assumptions. Don't jump to conclusions about why a child is being quiet or distant. There's always more to the story.
So resist the urge to, fill in the blanks with our own anxieties.
Yeah.
And really try to see it from their perspective.
Exactly. And remember, kids communicate through their behavior as well as their words. So paying attention to those nonverbal cues can be super insightful.
That makes sense, but how do you get them talking? Any tips from the source material?
There are actually some specific questioning techniques that can be helpful. Instead of just a vague, "How was your day?" try something more concrete, like, "What was the most interesting thing you learned at school today?"
Oh, okay. So you're giving them a starting point instead of this wide open question that might feel overwhelming.
Exactly. And then, of course, age-appropriate strategies are key.
Yeah.
Limiting screen time, finding shared activities to connect over, anything that creates those opportunities for genuine connection.
Right. And I imagine knowing when to seek professional help is crucial, especially if the withdrawn behavior is really persistent or concerning.
Absolutely.
Mm.
It's about finding that balance between providing support at home and knowing when you need extra guidance.
Okay, let's shift gears. Let's talk about another big family milestone, a new baby.
Oh, yeah.
Bringing home a sibling can be such a joyous time, but it also really shakes up the family dynamic.
Big time. It's a huge adjustment for everyone, especially those older siblings who are used to being, the center of attention. And those feelings of jealousy and resentment you mentioned, they're totally normal. But the Parent's Guide has some really good advice for preparing older kids for this big change.
Okay, I'm taking notes here. Give me the highlights.
First off, honesty is key. Explain the baby's arrival, the whole birth process, in a way that's age appropriate. Kids are way more perceptive than we give them credit for. And trying to sugarcoat things can really backfire.
So no need to make up those elaborate stork stories. Keep it real.
Right. And involve them. To help those older siblings feel included, involve them in welcoming and caring for the baby. Even small tasks like fetching diapers or singing a song, those things can make them feel like a valuable part of the process.
I love it. It gives them a sense of responsibility and helps them bond with their new sibling.
Exactly. And don't be surprised if some jealousy or regression crops up. It's a normal reaction to such a big shift in the family dynamic.
So that toddler, who was perfectly potty trained, starts having accidents again. It's their way of saying, hey, remember me.
Exactly. It's an opportunity to shower them with extra love and reassurance, letting them know they're still loved and valued, even with this new addition.
Yeah. Speaking of sibling dynamics,
Right.
let's talk about the age-old challenge. Sibling rivalry.
Oh, yeah.
Is there any escaping that?
I'd say it's pretty universal. It's practically a universal experience.
But man, it can be so frustrating for parents. Any insights from the Parent's Guide on how to manage those squabbles?
Well, it actually reframes sibling conflict as a developmental function, which I thought was interesting.
Really? How so?
Think of it as a training ground for all those essential social skills that they'll need later in life. Negotiating, compromising, standing up for themselves. It all plays out in those everyday sibling interactions.
So those squabbles over toys, over who gets to sit in the front seat, are actually helping them build valuable life skills.
Exactly. While we don't want to encourage constant fighting, there are ways to manage it in a healthy way.
Okay, so what are the strategies? Give me the goods.
One big one is avoiding comparisons. So instead of pitting kids against each other, why can't you be more like your sister? Instead, celebrate their individual strengths and talents. It's about fostering their unique identities, not making it a competition.
That's such a good point. It's so easy to fall into that trap of comparing siblings, but it can be so damaging to their confidence and create resentment.
Absolutely. And while we're setting them up for success, be realistic about sharing and cooperation. They won't always get along perfectly, and that's okay.
So letting go of that perfect family ideal and just embracing the chaos.
Precisely. And finally, the Parent's Guide stresses the importance of modeling those positive conflict resolution skills. Show them how to work through disagreements respectfully, and they'll be much better equipped to handle those situations on their own.
So leading by example, even when we're stressed and frazzled, no pressure, right?
Right. But it really does make a difference. Speaking of challenges that test our patience, let's talk about non-compliance and those infamous temper tantrums.
Oh, the temper tantrum, the soundtrack of early childhood. I think any parent who says they haven't dealt with them is not being entirely truthful.
Yeah, they're developmentally normal, but that doesn't make them any less draining. And this is where the Parent's Guide really shines. It explains this thing called the coercive cycle. It can be a real game changer for parents.
The coercive cycle. Okay, I'm intrigued. Tell me more.
So it's basically this pattern where a child's negative behavior, the tantrum, it's unintentionally reinforced by the parent's attention. The more we react, the more we give into it, the more likely it is to happen again.
So even though we're trying to stop the tantrum, our reaction might actually be feeding the beast.
Exactly. Breaking that cycle is key to managing tantrums effectively.
Okay, so what's the magic word? How do we break the cycle?
It's not about magic words. It's about developmentally appropriate strategies. Sometimes ignoring the tantrum is best. Sometimes it's about strategic timeouts. And of course, positive reinforcement goes a long way in encouraging those good behaviors.
So finding that balance between setting limits and rewarding positive behavior and staying calm ourselves, easier said than done.
You said it. And what works for one child might not work for another. It's really about finding what works best for your family and being consistent.
All right, let's take a break from the everyday chaos. Let's talk about something a little more fun. Family vacations
Ah, yes, those memory-making adventures.
that often come with their fair share of stress, especially with kids in tow.
Oh, tell me about it. Packing for a family trip can feel like preparing for a cross-country expedition. Any advice from the source material on making these trips run a little smoother?
Yeah. How do we survive?
Well, the Parent's Guide is all about planning for success. Consider your children's ages, their abilities, choose destinations and activities wisely, and, most importantly, manage those expectations.
So ditch the jam-packed itinerary and embrace the go-with-the-flow approach.
Exactly. It's better to have a relaxed trip that everyone enjoys than trying to cram in too much and ending up with everyone miserable.
Yeah, so true. But what about when those meltdowns do happen? Because let's be honest, they will. How do we deal with that on vacation?
Be flexible. Adapt to the challenges as they come up, and don't be afraid to deviate from the plan if things aren't working out.
So embracing spontaneity, remembering that sometimes the best memories are made when things don't go according to plan.
You got it. And don't underestimate those little comforts. Pack familiar snacks, games, favorite stuffed animals. A little bit of familiarity can go a long way.
It's all about being prepared.
Yeah.
All right, let's tackle a tougher subject, divorce. It's a difficult experience for everyone involved, but especially for kids, who are caught in the middle.
Absolutely. Divorce can have such a profound impact on children, and the Parent's Guide offers some really valuable advice on, you know, minimizing the negative effects.
Okay, this is something I know a lot of families go through, so I'm all ears.
One of the most important things is minimizing conflict exposure. Even though the parents aren't together anymore, it's crucial that they work together, to provide that stability and support for their kids.
So putting aside their own differences and really putting the kids' needs first.
Exactly. And creating age-appropriate parenting plans, maintaining open communication. It's about making sure the kids feel heard and understood throughout the process.
It sounds like clear communication and, presenting a united front, even in the midst of separation, can really make a difference.
It can. And of course, recognizing signs of distress in your kids and seeking professional help when needed is essential. Divorce is a huge life transition, and sometimes kids just need that extra support to deal with those big feelings.
Yeah, it's okay to ask for help. You're right. Divorce doesn't have to be a disaster, and families can come out of it stronger.
Absolutely. And speaking of family transitions, let's talk about step families. Blending families, it can be incredibly challenging. You've got all these moving parts, potential for baggage from previous relationships.
It's like trying to solve a complex puzzle where everyone's bringing their own pieces and hoping they fit together.
That's a great analogy. And the Parent's Guide does.
Things to keep in mind.
Well, first and foremost, establishing clear rules and expectations, making sure everyone's on the same page about house rules, discipline, even those seemingly little everyday things.
Right, so creating that consistency and predictability even amidst all the change.
Exactly. And something the Parent's Guide calls ghosts at the table.
Ghosts at the table.
Yeah, it's those unresolved issues from previous relationships that can really sabotage a blended family's dynamic.
It's like those unspoken tensions that just linger and create conflict even when everyone's trying their best.
Exactly. Acknowledging and addressing those unresolved issues, even if it's uncomfortable, is so important.
So clearing the air, making space for genuine connection.
Exactly. And patience is key here. Blending families takes time.
It's a journey.
It is. And celebrating those little victories along the way can make all the difference.
I like that. Now, let's broaden the perspective a little bit. Let's talk about non-traditional families.
Okay.
Families come in all shapes and sizes these days, and it's so important to acknowledge and support that diversity.
Couldn't agree more. And the Parent's Guide sheds light on some of the, unique challenges those families face, both internally and how the world kind of sees them.
Like what? What are some of those challenges?
Well, one of the biggest hurdles, honestly, institutional barriers. Policies, laws, they don't always reflect the reality of modern families.
So things like parental rights, custody arrangements, even access to benefits can be a real struggle.
Exactly. And on a social level, non-traditional families often lack that same support network that more traditional families might have.
They may not have that same network of family and friends to turn to for help.
Exactly. And sadly, they might also face discrimination or prejudice simply because of their family structure.
Yeah, that's heartbreaking. And how do those challenges, how do they impact the kids growing up in those families?
Well, one thing the Parents Guide touches on is the potential for those kids to feel different or ostracized, especially during those formative years, when peer acceptance is so important.
Makes sense. It's hard enough navigating those social waters without feeling like your family is somehow outside the norm.
Exactly. But open communication within the family, that can make a big difference. Talking openly about their family structure, addressing questions or concerns, and fostering a strong sense of family identity can really help kids navigate those challenges.
It's about creating that safe and loving space where they feel accepted and celebrated for who they are.
Exactly. And speaking of tough conversations, let's talk about something that so many parents find difficult. Talking about those sensitive, difficult topics with their
Oh,
kids.
I know what you mean. Like, how do you approach those conversations,
Yeah.
in a way that's age appropriate without overwhelming them or shutting down communication altogether?
It's definitely a delicate balance, but the Parent's Guide gives some helpful guidance. First and foremost, open and honest communication. Don't shy away from those tough topics. Address them head on.
It's no more sweeping things under the rug.
Right. Kids are smart. They pick up on those things. It's better to create that space where they feel comfortable asking questions and sharing their feelings.
That makes sense. But how do you actually do that? Have those conversations without scaring them or making things worse?
The key is to meet them where they are developmentally. So, provide age-appropriate explanations. Address their concerns in a way that actually makes sense to them.
Right. So no need to give a 5-year-old a college lecture on, the complexities of the world. Just answer their questions honestly and simply.
Exactly. And just as important as providing information is normalizing those big, often difficult feelings. Let kids know that it's okay to cry, to be angry, to feel confused or scared. There's no right or wrong way to grieve.
So creating that space where they can feel safe expressing those emotions without judgment.
Precisely. And of course, knowing when to seek professional help. Sometimes those conversations are just best had with the support of a therapist who can provide guidance.
Right. A good reminder that we don't have to have all the answers. It's okay to ask for help.
Absolutely. And speaking of family dynamics that can be tough, let's talk about marital conflict.
Ooh, that's a big one. I think a lot of parents underestimate the impact that their own relationship issues have on their kids.
It's true, even if parents aren't fighting directly in front of the kids, kids are incredibly perceptive. They pick up on that tension, the discord, those unspoken vibes in the home.
So even if we think we're shielding them, they're absorbing it. So what can parents do to kind of minimize that impact?
The Parents Guide encourages parents to really think about the impact their conflict has and to be mindful of what type of conflict they're engaging in. There's a difference between healthy disagreement and destructive conflict.
Okay, so some level of disagreement is normal in any relationship. But when it becomes chronic or explosive, that's when it starts to be harmful.
Exactly. And of course, if marital conflict escalates into something more serious, like domestic violence, seeking professional help is essential.
There's no excuse for domestic violence, and it's crucial to protect children from witnessing or experiencing any kind of harm.
Absolutely. Okay, I think we've covered a lot of ground when it comes to family issues. Let's shift our focus to those social and peer issues, which can be especially challenging during childhood and adolescence.
Yeah, those social dynamics can be a minefield. It's hard to know how to best support our kids through all of that.
It's true. Peer relationships are such a huge part of development, shaping their sense of self, social skills, their well-being overall. And the Parents Guide breaks down those stages of friendship development from toddlerhood all the way through adolescence.
Oh, I'm curious. What are some of those key developmental milestones in terms of friendships?
Well, in toddlerhood, it's all about parallel play. Kids are playing next to each other, but they're not really interacting directly. Then as they get older, it shifts to more cooperative play, sharing toys, working together.
And then by the time they reach school age, they're forming those more complex friendships with shared interests and inside jokes and all that good stuff.
Yeah, exactly. And then adolescence hits, and you've got those really intense, all-consuming friendships that can feel like life or death to a teenager.
Oh, I remember those days. It's like the whole world revolves around your friends.
It really can. And those relationships can have such an impact on a teenager's self-esteem, their sense of belonging.
So how can parents best support kids through those different stages of friendship development? Is it about intervening or more about creating that supportive environment?
It's a little bit of both. The Parent's Guide really emphasizes fostering those social skills early on, providing opportunities for interaction, and being attuned to any signs of social anxiety or avoidance.
So creating that safe space where they can practice those skills and make mistakes without judgment.
Exactly. And if a child is really struggling to make friends or their anxieties are interfering with their life, professional help is always an option.
That's great advice. Okay, let's talk about sportsmanship.
Okay.
It's a quality we all want our kids to have, right?
Right.
Both on and off the field.
Absolutely. And the Parent's Guide offers some great tips on how to teach kids about fairness, respect, teamwork.
So it's not just about winning and losing, it's how you play the game.
Exactly. And as with so many things, modeling that behavior ourselves, if we're yelling at the referees or trash talking the other team, our kids are going to pick up on that.
It's that whole do as I say, not as I do thing that never really works.
Right. It's about walking the walk, not just talking the talk.
All right, let's address a serious issue that sadly affects far too many kids. Bullying. It can have such devastating consequences.
That's heartbreaking. And the Parent's Guide gives a really comprehensive overview of bullying, its impact, what parents can do to address it.
So first things first, what is bullying? What does it actually look like?
Yeah.
Because I think there are a lot of misconceptions out there.
You're right. Bullying isn't just a one-time thing or a simple disagreement. It's about repeated aggressive behavior that involves a power imbalance.
So it's intended to harm or intimidate another person, and it's not a fair fight.
Exactly. And it can take many forms, from physical aggression to verbal abuse, social exclusion, even cyberbullying.
So it's not just about punches and shoves. It can be emotional and psychological too.
Right. And the Parent's Guide stresses recognizing the signs and taking action right away.
So what are some red flags that parents should be looking for?
Things like frequent absences from school, sudden changes in behavior, unexplained injuries, drop in grades. Those can all be warning signs.
So paying attention to those patterns, not just brushing it off as typical kid stuff.
Right. Early intervention is key. And the Parent's Guide suggests a multi-pronged approach: open communication with the school, addressing any underlying mental health concerns, and creating a plan to encourage attendance.
So understanding the why behind the avoidance and working with the child, not against them.
Spot on. And just like those other challenges, professional help can be invaluable in crafting an effective intervention. Now, while we're talking about school, we can't forget those inevitable conflicts with teachers.
Ooh, those can be tricky. As a parent, you want to advocate for your child, but you also don't want to be that parent constantly swooping in and causing trouble.
It's a tough balance, and the Parent's Guide emphasizes those positive teacher-student relationships from day one.
So building that foundation of mutual respect and open communication right from the start.
Exactly. And when conflicts do arise, because they will, it's about giving your child those conflict resolution skills.
It's less about winning the argument, more about finding a solution.
Right. And don't underestimate the power of talking to the teacher. They might not even be aware of the issue, and a calm, open conversation can often clear things up before they escalate.
And, teachers are human too. They make mistakes, have good days and bad days, just like the rest of us.
Absolutely. Approaching those conversations with empathy can go a long way. Okay, let's dive into the wonderful world of adolescence.
Oh yeah, those teenage years.
Where those childhood challenges, they often morph into a whole new set of complexities.
A time of growth and self-discovery, but also those intense emotions, all that confusing social stuff. And yeah, plenty of challenges for both teens and parents.
Couldn't have said it better myself. And the Parent's Guide has some really insightful advice for navigating those waters.
Let's start with something that's a major stressor for a lot of families: the college application process.
Oh, yes. The college application frenzy. It's a lot for both teens and parents to handle. You've got the pressure to get good grades, ace those tests, write those perfect essays. It's like this huge looming milestone that suddenly everyone's focused on. Any advice from the source material on, keeping things in perspective?
How do we not lose our minds?
The Parent's Guide really stresses managing those expectations, you know? Start those conversations early. Don't wait until senior year when the pressure cooker is already like at full blast.
Yeah.
And be realistic about those goals. Not every kid is meant for an Ivy League school, and that's perfectly fine.
Right. It's about finding that right fit, not just chasing the big name.
Exactly. And while supporting your team through the process is key, avoid over-involvement. Let them own their applications, their essays, their choices. It's their journey, after all.
So finding that balance between being supportive and letting them, spread their wings a bit.
Right. Speaking of spreading wings, let's talk about another milestone getting that driver's license.
Oh, the freedom.
Yes.
But also the worry. I think every parent feels that mix, right?
For good reason. Teenagers are statistically more likely to get into accidents. So what can we do? How do we instill those safe driving habits?
Yeah, what does the guide say?
It emphasizes modeling those behaviors ourselves. If we're speeding, texting while driving, or being reckless, our kids are going to pick up on that.
Actions speak louder than words, as they say.
Exactly. And beyond modeling, it's about setting clear rules and expectations with consequences. No texting while driving, curfews should be enforced. And those early driving experiences, those should be closely supervised.
So being firm about those boundaries, even when it's tough.
Absolutely. It's about keeping them safe. Okay, let's tackle another tough one. Substance use.
Ooh, yeah.
It's a reality for many teenagers, and it can be hard to even know where to begin those conversations.
Absolutely. It's such a sensitive topic.
It is. But the Parent's Guide, again, is a good resource. It offers a really good overview of substance use among adolescents.
So what are some of the things parents should be aware of?
Well, peer pressure is huge,
Mhm.
as is the teen's individual personality, mental health, a history of substance abuse in the family that can also increase the risk. And again, open communication is key. Talk to your kids, but do it in a way that feels non-judgmental, not accusatory.
Creating that space where they feel safe coming to us if they are struggling.
Exactly. And if you suspect your team is already using substances, get professional help. There's no shame in it. Early intervention can make a world of difference.
Right. It's a reminder that we don't have to go through this alone. There is support out there. Okay, let's talk about something that I think is especially hard for teenagers today. Body image and physical appearance.
Oh, it's tough. Teenagers are constantly bombarded with these messages about how they should look, which leads to, so much insecurity.
It's like this impossible standard of beauty.
Yeah.
And social media just amplifies it.
It does. And the Parent's Guide offers some good advice on promoting body acceptance, challenging those ideals.
Okay, I'm ready for some positivity. How can parents actually help with this?
Talk about it. Acknowledge the pressures they're facing, Discuss the impact of media. Point out how those images are often so heavily edited, they're unrealistic.
Just helping them develop that critical eye.
Exactly. And it's about promoting body acceptance, helping your teen appreciate their unique body. Focus on health, not just appearance. Celebrate diversity.
Love that. Shifting the focus from fitting in to embracing who they are.
Exactly. And if your teen is really struggling, don't hesitate to seek professional help. A therapist can be so helpful in those situations.
Yeah, sometimes we need that extra support to work through things. Okay, let's address something that can be so hard to talk about. Suicide risk and self-injury.
It's a heavy subject, but so important to talk about. Suicide is a leading cause of death among teens, but it's often preventable. And the Parent's Guide. It breaks down those risk factors, warning signs, how to get help.
So knowledge is power here.
Yeah.
What are some red flags that parents should watch out for?
Any talk about suicide, expressing feelings of hopelessness, worthlessness, withdrawing from friends and family, sudden changes in behavior or engaging in risky behaviors, those are all potential warning signs.
So any sign that something feels off, basically.
Right. And what do you do if you suspect something? Don't wait. Talk to them directly, express your concern, let them know you're there for them, and get professional help immediately. There are resources available, hotlines, therapists, support groups,
It's a reminder that we're not in this alone. Okay, let's move into our final section, focusing on a universal experience that's, well, it can be especially tough for young people. Grief and loss.
Loss is a part of life, but it doesn't make it any easier to cope with, especially for children who are still learning how to process those big emotions.
And I think a lot of parents really struggle with, how to even talk about death and loss, how to do it in a way that's age appropriate without either sugarcoating it or making it more scary.
It's a tough balance, and the Parent's Guide is great here. It really highlights those developmental differences in how kids grieve, which I think can be really helpful for parents to understand.
So how does grief look different in kids of different ages?
Well, younger children, they often don't grasp the permanence of death. They might think the person is just sleeping or on a trip. They might not even have the words to express what they're feeling.
So their grief might come out through their behavior, tantrums or being extra clingy, maybe even regressing in things like potty training.
Exactly. As kids get older, they start to understand the finality of it, but they still might struggle to process those emotions and cope.
So how can parents support them through that grieving process, no matter how old the child is?
The Parent's Guide stresses honesty, age-appropriate explanations. Don't shield them from the truth. Answer their questions honestly, but in a way that makes sense for them.
So no need to go into every detail, but be straightforward.
Exactly. And just as important as giving information is creating that safe space for them to express those emotions. Let them know it's okay to cry, to be angry, to feel sad, confused. There's no right or wrong way to grieve.
And if their grief seems really prolonged, interfering with their life, seeking professional help is always an option.
Absolutely. Okay, while we're on the topic of loss and trauma, let's talk about coping with those larger scale events, those things that can really shake a child's sense of security. Things like natural disasters, terrorism, even community
Those are
violence.
such heavy experiences, and it's easy to underestimate the impact on kids, I think.
It's true. And the Parent's Guide offers some really valuable insights on how to help. First, it's understanding that there's a whole range of reactions kids might have after a disaster or a traumatic event.
Okay, so what are some of those common responses? What might parents actually see?
They can be emotional, behavioral, even physical. Emotionally, kids might experience fear, anxiety, sadness, anger, guilt, the whole gamut. Behaviorally, you might see clinginess, regression, maybe nightmares, difficulty sleeping, acting out.
So those big feelings are coming out in different ways.
Right. Cognitively, they might have trouble concentrating, experience intrusive thoughts, or even just struggle to understand what happened.
And those big feelings, they can manifest physically too. Headaches, stomach aches, fatigue, changes in appetite, sleep patterns.
Exactly. It's a whole body experience,
Yeah.
and every child's going to react differently.
So in those moments when something like that has happened, how do we as parents best support them? How do we help them feel safe?
The Parent's Guide outlines 3 key principles for providing what they call psychological first aid. Promote safety, connect, and cope.
Okay, break those down for me. What does that actually look like?
Promoting safety means creating an environment where the child feels protected, both physically and emotionally. That might mean limiting media exposure, reassuring them they're safe, creating predictable routines.
So creating that haven, that safe space amidst the chaos.
Exactly. Connecting means providing emotional support, reassurance, listening to their concerns, validating their feelings, letting them know they're not alone.
Just being present, being
Ah,
apathetic, really listening.
right. And finally, coping. This is about giving them strategies to manage stress and anxiety, teaching relaxation techniques like deep breathing, encouraging them to talk about their feelings, engaging in activities that bring a sense of calm.
So giving them those tools to regulate their emotions, to feel a bit more in control.
Exactly. And of course, if a child is really struggling, seeking professional help is always a good option.
It's okay to reach out for help. We don't have to have all the answers. Wow, this has been such a comprehensive deep dive. So many different challenges that kids might face. It's amazing how interconnected they all are.
Isn't it? A sleep problem could contribute to picky eating, which then leads to body image issues down the line. It's like this ripple effect, highlighting how important it is to really see the whole child.
To consider all those factors that might be influencing their behavior and well-being.
Exactly. And to approach those challenges with empathy, understanding, and a willingness to seek help when needed.
Speaking of help, it's important to remember that seeking support is a sign of strength, not weakness.
Absolutely. And speaking of strength, let's touch on something that's crucial for navigating any challenge: resilience.
Resilience, that ability to bounce back, to keep going when things get tough. How do we help our kids build that?
The Parent's Guide points to several factors. Strong, supportive relationships are huge. Those close bonds with family, friends, even mentors, those can provide such a buffer against stress.
It's like having that safety net, knowing there are people they can count on.
Exactly. And equally important, developing a sense of self-efficacy, that belief in their own ability to cope.
Hmm.
It's about empowering them to problem solve, make decisions, take action.
So fostering their independence, their ability to navigate the world, even when it's hard.
Right. And it's about a growth mindset, you know?
Hmm.
Viewing challenges as opportunities to learn and grow, not just as setbacks or
But
failures.
teaching them to embrace those oops moments, to
Yeah.
learn from their mistakes and not let them define them.
Exactly. And along with that growth mindset, a sense of purpose, helping kids find something they're passionate about that can give them such a sense of direction.
It's about finding that spark, what lights them up and makes them excited to contribute to the world.
Beautifully said. And maybe the most important ingredient in all of this, hope. Instilling that belief that things will get better, that can be so powerful.
It's holding on to that light at the end of the tunnel, knowing that even the darkest storms pass.
Beautifully put. And parents can foster these qualities in their kids through their words, their actions, the environment they create. It's about modeling resilience ourselves, being supportive, creating a home where kids feel safe, loved, and empowered.
Giving them those tools, the coping skills, the problem-solving strategies, that emotional intelligence,
Mhm.
so they can face the world with confidence.
Exactly. It's about setting them up for success, not just for today, but for all the challenges and triumphs life will throw their way.
This has been incredible. Such a deep dive into childhood challenges. I feel like we've barely scratched the surface.
We've covered a lot, but you're right, there's always more to learn. And I think the most important takeaway from all of this is that every child is unique.
They have their own strengths, their own challenges, their own way of seeing the world.
Exactly. And as parents, it's about meeting them where they are, supporting them, loving them, and helping them thrive.
That's a beautiful way to put it. And I think it's a perfect reminder that while parenting can be challenging, it's also one of the most rewarding experiences there is.
Couldn't agree more.
Oh, wait, before we wrap up, I have one more question for you. And it's a bit of a head scratcher. We've talked so much about how we, as adults, can support kids through challenges. But I'm curious, what are some ways that we unintentionally add to those challenges? Those well-meaning but maybe misguided things we do that might actually be making it harder.
Ooh, that's a good one. That's something for all of you listening to ponder.
I love it. A little homework assignment for everyone.
Exactly. Until next time, happy learning and keep those deep dives coming.
So we've explored a ton of childhood challenges today, from health issues to family dynamics to those social and emotional struggles. And we've learned about a whole bunch of evidence-based strategies for supporting kids.
And remember, knowledge is power. The more we understand about these challenges, the better equipped we'll be to help the kids in our lives thrive.
Couldn't have said it better myself. And for those of you who want to dive even deeper into this, definitely check out The Parent's Guide to Psychological First Aid. It's packed with info and advice, all presented in a way that's really accessible.
I second that. It's a book every parent, every caregiver should have.
All right, folks, that's a wrap for our deep dive into the world of childhood challenges. It's been a journey.
It has. But remember, you're not alone on this path. Keep learning, keep connecting, and keep those deep dives coming. We're here to support you every step of the way.
Until next time, happy parenting, everyone.
Happy parenting.
Yeah, it's a good one. It's like we're so focused on doing the right thing as parents, but sometimes our best intentions, they kind of backfire.
It happens, and those aha moments when you realize, oh, that's how I was contributing to the problem. Those are gold. It's all part of the learning curve, right?
Absolutely. And speaking of learning, we've covered so much ground today, health issues, family dynamics, all those social and emotional challenges. It's a lot to process.
It is. But if there's one thing I hope people take away from this, it's that knowledge is power. The more we understand about these challenges, the better equipped we are to support the kids in our lives.
So true. And you know what? This whole deep dive has really highlighted for me the importance of seeking professional help when it's needed, of course.
I agree. It's not a sign of weakness, it's a sign of strength. Recognizing that we don't have to do this all on our own, that there are experts out there who can help guide us. That's huge.
Absolutely. And for those who want to keep exploring all of this, The Parent's Guide to Psychological First Aid, it really is a must-read. It's so well written, full of practical strategies that anyone can use.
I couldn't agree more. It's like having a trusted advisor right there on your bookshelf, ready to offer support.
All right, folks, that wraps up our deep dive into the world of childhood challenges. It's been quite the journey.
It has. But remember, you're not alone on this path. Keep learning, keep connecting, and keep those deep dives coming. We're here to support you every step of the way.
Until next time, happy parenting, everyone.